Tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Dreams and Designs. Dominic Voss ran his hand along the glossy red finish of his 1967 Shelby GT500. The morning sunlight caught the chrome trim, sending sharp reflections across the garage walls. This wasn't just any muscle car. It was the culmination of 6 years of searching, 3 years of restoration work, and countless late nights spent hunched over engine parts. Beautiful, isn't she? He said to no one in particular. His wife, Vanessa, leaned against the doorframe of their attached garage, coffee mug in hand. Her sleek blonde hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, highlighting sharp cheekbones and ice blue eyes that rarely warmed, even when she smiled. "You spend more time with that car than you do with me," she remarked, not for the first time. Dominic slid out from under the hood. "She doesn't complain as much," he replied with a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Their relationship had been strained for months, maybe years if he was being honest with himself. Dominic had built his architectural firm from nothing into one of Boston's most sought-after boutique design agencies. The success had come at a cost. Long hours, endless business trips, and a growing distance between him and Vanessa that seemed to stretch wider with each passing month. "Your mother called," Vanessa said, setting her mug down on his workbench, narrowly missing a carefully organized row of socket wrenches. "She wants us over for dinner tonight." Dominic sighed. His relationship with his parents was complicated at best. They had never approved of his career choice. Architecture was too unstable, too artistic for their practical, middle-class sensibilities. His father, Theodore, had worked 40 years at the same insurance company, and his mother, Patricia, had been a high school administrative assistant until retirement. They had expected their only son to follow a similarly predictable path. "Tell them I'm busy," Dominic said, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "I already said we'd be there at 7. This was Vanessa's way, making decisions without consulting him, then presenting them as foregone conclusions. In the early days of their 12-year marriage, he'd found her take-charge attitude refreshing. Now it just felt controlling. The dinner that night was predictably uncomfortable. Theodore dominated the conversation with thinly veiled criticisms of Dominic's career choices, while Patricia served pot roast and passive-aggressive comments in equal measure. "How are the European clients treating you?" Theodore asked, cutting into his meat with unnecessary force. "Still jitting off to Paris and Milan on someone else's dime?" "They're paying clients, Dad. That's how business works," Dominic replied evenly. "In my day, we called that a vacation," Theodore grumbled. Patricia chimed in, "We just worry about your stability, dear. All these trips, that fancy car of yours, it doesn't seem practical." Dominic noticed Vanessa and his mother exchanging glances across the table, a silent communication he couldn't decipher. Something cold settled in the pit of his stomach. Back home that night, Dominic discovered a text message on Vanessa's phone while she was in the shower. It was from a number saved simply as B. "I miss you already. Tomorrow can't come soon enough." Dominic stared at the screen, the message blurring as something primal and angry surged through him. He put the phone down exactly as he'd found it and walked to the garage, where he spent the next 3 hours working on a Shelby, his mind racing with suspicions but not yet ready to confront them. 2 days later, Dominic's business partner, Garrett Wu, called with news that would change everything. "We got it," Garrett said, excitement evident in his voice. "The Berlin project. They want us to redesign their entire corporate headquarters." The Berlin project was exactly what their firm needed: international recognition, financial security, and a chance to implement the innovative, sustainable design concepts Dominic had been developing for years. "That's incredible," Dominic replied, genuine excitement momentarily pushing aside his personal concerns. "What's the timeline?" "That's the thing," Garrett hesitated. "They need you on site within 72 hours. Initial phase is 6 weeks minimum." Dominic thought about the timing. 6 weeks away would give him space to clear his head about Vanessa, to decide what to do about his suspicions. Maybe the distance would even help their marriage. "I'll be on the next flight," he said. Chapter 2. red flags, and departures. The night before his departure for Berlin, Dominic found Vanessa on the phone in their bedroom, speaking in hushed tones. When she noticed him standing in the doorway, she quickly ended the call. "Work," she explained with a dismissive wave. Vanessa was a real estate agent specializing in high-end properties, which often meant irregular hours, but something in her tone didn't ring true. "I was thinking," Dominic said carefully, "maybe you could come visit me in Berlin for a weekend. Once I'm settled." Vanessa's response was immediate and firm. I can't leave the Westbrook listing right now. It's a multi-million-dollar property." "Right," Dominic nodded, watching her face for any telltale signs of deception. He found none. Vanessa had always been skilled at maintaining a perfect poker face, one of the assets that made her successful in sales. That night, as he packed his suitcase, Dominic added one item that wasn't on his usual travel checklist: a small, inconspicuous tracking device that he carefully attached to a magnetic holder underneath Vanessa's car before dawn the next morning. 6 weeks, Vanessa said at the airport, her goodbye kiss landing on his cheek rather than his lips. "Try not to work too hard. I'll call every day," Dominic promised, knowing he probably wouldn't. As his plane lifted off from Boston Logan International, Dominic felt a strange mixture of apprehension and relief. Berlin represented both escape and purpose, a chance to immerse himself in the work he loved while gaining perspective on his increasingly troubled marriage. The first week in Berlin passed in a blur of meetings, site surveys, and collaborative sessions with the German engineering team. Dominic's days started at 7 a.m. and often ended well after midnight. He called Vanessa twice, brief conversations that felt like obligatory check-ins rather than meaningful communication. It was during the second week that he decided to check the tracking app. What he saw confirmed his worst suspicions. For the past 9 days, Vanessa's car had made regular trips to an address in Cambridge, an upscale neighborhood about 30 minutes from their home. Each visit lasted between 3 and 6 hours, always ending with her return home well before Dominic would normally arrive from work. Dominic copied the address and sent it to his oldest friend, Leo Blackwood, a private investigator whose services Dominic had used occasionally for background checks on potential clients. "Need info on this location and whoever lives there. Urgent and confidential." Leo's response came 8 hours later, a comprehensive report that turned Dominic's world upside down. The Cambridge address belonged to Blake Reynolds, a 38-year-old finance executive at Corwin Capital. Blake was divorced, no children, with an annual income that rivaled Dominic's own. The report included surveillance photos showing Vanessa entering Blake's townhouse using her own key, and one particularly damning image of them embracing on the doorstep. Halfway around the world, Dominic sat alone in his hotel room, staring at his laptop screen until his eyes burned. The betrayal was one thing, painful but not entirely surprising given the state of their marriage. But something else nagged at him. The timing of this affair coincided with his parents' increasingly hostile attitudes toward him, particularly his mother's recent fixation on his impractical lifestyle choices. Acting on instinct, Dominic made a call to his home security company and accessed the recordings from the cameras he'd installed throughout their house the previous year. He scanned through footage from the week after his departure and felt his blood run cold. On the screen, he watched as his parents entered his home with Vanessa. The three of them disappeared into the garage, emerging 20 minutes later looking somber but determined. The next day's footage showed professional movers arriving and carefully loading his prized Shelby GT 500 onto a transport truck. They had sold his car, his passion project, his one true indulgence, the vehicle that represented thousands of hours of personal labor and dedication. Dominic's hands trembled as he picked up his phone and called Leo again. "I need more," he said without preamble. "Everything you can find on Blake Reynolds. And I need you to track a vehicle." He provided the details of his Shelby, hoping it wasn't too late. 3 days later, Leo delivered another report. The Shelby had been sold to a private collector in Connecticut for $285,000, significantly below its market value of approximately $425,000. The transfer had been legal, facilitated by Dominic's mother, who had been listed as co-owner on the insurance paperwork years earlier. a detail Dominic had overlooked or forgotten. The money from the sale had been transferred directly to Vanessa's personal account, not their joint account. Bank records Leo had somehow obtained showed that $215,000 of that amount had subsequently been transferred to Blake Reynolds 2 days after the sale. The final piece of the puzzle came in the form of a social media post that Leo had discovered on Blake's private Instagram account, a photo of Vanessa's hand sporting an enormous diamond engagement ring. Captioned simply, "She said yes." New beginnings. The timestamp on the post was exactly 1 week after Dominic had left for Berlin. As the full picture emerged, something shifted inside Dominic. The shock and pain crystallized into something harder, colder, more focused. He spent the next hour making calls to his lawyer, his financial advisor, and finally to Garrett. "I need another week here in Berlin," he told his business partner. "And then I'm going to need some personal time." "Everything okay?" Garrett asked, concern evident in his voice. "Not yet," Dominic replied, "but it will be." Chapter 3. Betrayal Unveiled. While Dominic immersed himself in the Berlin project, working 18-hour days to complete his obligations ahead of schedule, he simultaneously laid the groundwork for what would come next. Revenge required planning, patience, and precision, 3 qualities he had in abundance. The first step was financial insulation. Working with his attorney, Dominic transferred significant assets to newly created accounts and investment vehicles that Vanessa couldn't access. He wasn't hiding assets. Everything would be disclosed in the inevitable divorce proceedings, but he was ensuring she couldn't drain their joint resources before he returned. The second step involved gathering information. Through Leo, Dominic compiled comprehensive dossiers on all the key players: Vanessa, Blake, and his parents. He learned that Blake and Vanessa had first met 8 months earlier at a charity gala that Dominic had been too busy to attend. Their affair had begun almost immediately, according to text records Leo had somehow obtained. Most disturbing was the discovery that his parents had not merely been bystanders, but active participants in the betrayal. Email exchanges between his mother and Vanessa revealed a shared contempt for Dominic that cut deeper than the infidelity itself. His mother had repeatedly referred to him as selfish, absent, and delusional about his importance, while Vanessa had complained about his emotional unavailability and obsession with work and that stupid car. The car, his beloved Shelby, had been targeted specifically because it represented Dominic's independence and passion. Selling it had been a calculated act of control disguised as practicality. By the time Dominic boarded his return flight to Boston 4 weeks after his departure, his anger had cooled into something more dangerous: absolute resolve. He had taken an additional week to put certain elements in place, including hiring a moving company to secretly pack and relocate his most important possessions to a storage facility while Vanessa was out of the house. His flight landed at 10:32 a.m. on a Tuesday. According to Leo's surveillance, Vanessa was at Blake's Cambridge townhouse, where she had been spending increasing amounts of time. His parents were expecting him for dinner that evening. A welcome home gathering that Vanessa had arranged before informing him she wouldn't be able to attend due to work commitments. Dominic took a taxi directly to his parents' modest suburban home, letting himself in with his key. They weren't expecting him until evening, and he found his mother in the kitchen, preparing what appeared to be an elaborate meal. "Dominic," Patricia exclaimed, startled by his early arrival. "We weren't expecting you until 6. Your father's still at his doctor's appointment. I wanted to surprise you," Dominic said, his voice neutral as he set his carry-on bag down. "Thought we could have some time to talk before dinner." Patricia's expression flickered with momentary unease before she composed herself. "Of course, dear. Let me just put on some coffee." They sat at the kitchen table, the same one Dominic had grown up with, its laminate surface worn thin in spots from decades of family meals. Patricia chatted nervously about neighborhood gossip and Theodore's arthritis, while avoiding any mention of Vanessa or Dominic's trip. Finally, Dominic cut through the small talk. "I know about the car, Mom." Patricia's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. "What car, dear?" "The Shelby GT 500 that you helped Vanessa sell while I was away," Dominic said calmly. "My car. The one I spent 3 years restoring." The color drained slightly from Patricia's face, but she recovered quickly. Oh, that old thing. Well, Vanessa explained the situation, and we agreed it was for the best. You've always been impractical about money, Dominic. That car was just sitting there, depreciating. Classic cars don't depreciate, Mom. They appreciate. That old thing was worth over $400,000. Patricia waved a dismissive hand. Well, Vanessa got a very good price for it. She said it would help both of you start fresh. Start fresh, Dominic repeated. Is that what you call it when your son's wife sells his prized possession to finance her engagement to another man? The cup in Patricia's hand clattered against the saucer. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, Dominic said, removing his phone from his pocket and sliding it across the table. On the screen was the Instagram photo of Vanessa's hand with the enormous diamond ring, alongside a bank statement showing the transfer to Blake Reynolds. Patricia stared at the screen, then back at Dominic, her expression hardening rather than showing remorse. Well, what did you expect? You were never here. Always working, always with that car. Vanessa deserves someone who puts her first. Dominic felt a cold calm settle over him. And you decided that for me, did you? You and Dad and Vanessa all sat down and decided what I deserve. Someone had to be practical. Patricia snapped, her true feelings emerging. You've been living in a fantasy world since you were a child. Your father and I always had to be the realists. You'd still be drawing pictures in a garret somewhere if we hadn't pushed you to at least make those silly drawings into a career. Those silly drawings built a multi-million-dollar architectural firm that designs buildings across 3 continents, Dominic replied evenly. Patricia's expression twisted with a bitterness that shocked even Dominic. And where did that get you? A wife who couldn't stand to be around you. No children, no real legacy. Just pretty buildings and an old car you were too busy to even drive. While I was on a business trip, my parents sold my dream sports car, TO, fund, my cheating wife's engagement with her lover, Dominic said, his voice rising slightly for the first time. When I returned, my mockingly said, thanks to your car, your wife found true love after being with pathetic loser life like you. Patricia's eyes widened at having her scheme laid out so plainly, but instead of denying it, she doubled down. Well, it's true, isn't it? Blake is twice the man you'll ever be. He appreciates Vanessa, treats her like a queen. What did you ever do except ignore her for your precious career and that ridiculous car? Dominic laughed then, a genuine laugh that seemed to unnerve his mother more than anger would have. Why are you laughing? She demanded, her voice shrill. Because you have no idea what you've done, Dominic said, his laughter subsiding into a cold smile. None of you do. The revelation he shared next made Patricia's face go pale. Dominic laid out exactly what he knew about the affair, about the conspiracies between his wife and parents, about the car sale and the ring purchase. But more importantly, he revealed the first elements of what he had set in motion during his extended stay in Berlin. I've already filed for divorce on grounds of adultery, with evidence Leo collected. The papers will be served to Vanessa tomorrow at Blake's apartment, where she's been living half-time while I was away. I've frozen all our joint accounts and secured my separate assets. I've also filed a civil suit against you and Dad for conversion of property regarding the car. Patricia's hand flew to her throat. You wouldn't sue your own parents. I already have, Dominic replied calmly. The complaint alleges that you exceeded your authority as a co-signer on the insurance by representing yourself as an owner with right to sell. Your status was only for liability purposes in case I was incapacitated, and you knew that. We were trying to help, Patricia stammered, but the excuse sounded hollow even to her own ears. And that's just the beginning, Dominic continued, standing up from the table. You should know that your little scheme cost me more than just a car. It cost you a son. As he walked to the door, Patricia called after him, her voice cracking. Dominic, please, you don't understand. We were worried about you. Dominic paused at the doorway. Save it for the deposition, Mom. I'll see myself out. As he stepped onto the porch, his phone buzzed with a text from Leo. She's on the move. Heading to your house. It was time for the next confrontation. Chapter 4. Face to Face. Dominic arrived at the expansive colonial he had shared with Vanessa for the last 7 years. noting with grim satisfaction that her BMW was already in the driveway. For a moment, he sat in his rental car, gathering his thoughts. This confrontation would require a different approach than the one with his mother. Vanessa was shrewder, more emotionally controlled, and far more calculating. The house felt different as he entered, emptier somehow, though nothing obvious had changed. Vanessa was in their bedroom, hurriedly packing a suitcase when he appeared in the doorway. She froze, an armful of designer clothes suspended between the closet and the bed. "Dominic, you're early." "Clearly," he replied, leaning against the doorframe with deceptive casualness. "Don't stop on my account, though I'm curious why you're packing. Moving in with Blake already." Vanessa's perfectly maintained composure slipped for just a second before she recovered. "I see you've been talking to your mother, among others." "Then you know," she said, resuming her packing with deliberate movements. "I was going to tell you when you got back tonight. This isn't how I wanted you to find out." "By this, do you mean the affair you've been having for 8 months, the fact that you sold my car behind my back, or your engagement to another man while still married to me?" Dominic asked, his tone conversational despite the damning accusations. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "I should have known your precious car would be what you focused on. Not our failing marriage, not my happiness, the car. The car is symbolic, Vanessa. It represents the fact that you, with my parents' help, deliberately stole something I valued and used it to finance your infidelity." "It wasn't theft," she snapped. "Your mother was co-owner. For insurance purposes only, as you well know. But we can let the courts sort that out." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I filed for divorce on grounds of adultery. The papers will be delivered to Blake's address tomorrow, since that seems to be where you spend most of your time now." Dominic stepped further into the room. "It also means I've frozen our joint accounts and documented all marital assets." "You can't do that," Vanessa exclaimed, dropping all pretense of calm. "I already have," Dominic replied. "But don't worry about money. You've got that $215,000 you transfer to Blake for your engagement ring. That should keep you comfortable until the divorce is finalized." The color drained from Vanessa's face. "How did you know about the money? The ring? The Instagram post?" "I know everything, Vanessa. Every meeting, text, night you spent at his place while I was in Berlin." Dominic's voice remained steady. "I even know about the discussions you had with my parents, where you all decided I was such a terrible husband that I deserved to be robbed and betrayed." "It wasn't like that," Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "No." "Then tell me what it was like," Dominic challenged. "Explain to me how you justified selling my car without my knowledge or consent, then using the money to buy your engagement ring from another man. All while I was working 18-hour days in Berlin to build a future I thought we shared. You were never here." Vanessa burst out, her composure finally cracking. "Even when you were physically present, your mind was always on work or that stupid car. Do you know how many dinners I ate alone? How many events I attended by myself? Because you were too busy? Blake actually sees me. He listens when I talk. He..." "Sounds perfect," Dominic interrupted. "You two deserve each other. I hope the ring was worth it." As he turned to leave, Vanessa's voice took on a desperate edge. "The prenup says I get half of everything if you're the one who files for divorce." Dominic paused, allowing himself a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Check the infidelity clause, Section 8B. Documented adultery voids your claim to my premarital assets and business interests. You get half the marital property acquired during our marriage, minus the value of my car that you illegally converted." "You wouldn't have that proof without spying on me," Vanessa countered, her legal mind already working on defense strategies. "Actually, I would. You weren't exactly discreet, Vanessa. Public displays of affection at restaurants, using your own key to his place in full view of neighbors, posting engagement photos online while still married to me. The courts tend to frown on that level of flagrancy." Vanessa's face flushed with anger. "This isn't over, Dominic. Blake has connections. So do I," Dominic interrupted again, "including at Corwin Capital's board of directors. Did you know they have a strict policy against executives engaging in relationships that might create ethical conflicts or public relations issues?" I wonder how they'd feel about Blake getting engaged to a married woman and accepting funds from the sale of property that wasn't hers to sell. Vanessa's eyes widened slightly, the first indication that she recognized she might have underestimated him. You have until tomorrow morning to remove your personal belongings, Dominic continued. Anything left behind will be considered abandoned property. My attorney will contact you regarding the division of assets and court dates. As he walked toward the front door, Vanessa called after him. Where are you going to stay? This is still half my house. Actually, the house is in my name alone, Dominic corrected her. It was purchased before our marriage with my inheritance from my grandmother. The prenup you signed specifically excludes it from marital property. Check section 3A. He paused at the front door. But to answer your question, I'll be at the Cambridge Regency downtown for the next few days. I need to be close to my lawyer's office while we sort all this out. The Cambridge Regency, the same hotel where Blake Reynolds had taken Vanessa for their first clandestine meeting, according to Leo's investigation. The choice was deliberate, a subtle psychological jab that Dominic knew would unsettle Vanessa far more than an outburst of anger. As he left, he heard the distinct sound of something expensive shattering against the wall behind him. For the first time in months, Dominic smiled genuinely. The confrontations with his mother and Vanessa had gone exactly as anticipated, the first steps in a carefully orchestrated plan that was just beginning to unfold. Chapter 5. Strategic Patience. The Cambridge Regency Hotel's presidential suite offered a panoramic view of Boston's skyline. Dominic stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city lights while speaking on the phone with Leo. She left the house at 8:42 p.m. with 3 suitcases and a designer handbag, Leo reported. Headed straight to Reynolds Place in Cambridge. She was crying in the car. And my parents? Dominic asked. Your father returned home around 5:15. There was a heated discussion based on the surveillance audio. Your mother told him everything. He made 3 calls afterward, one to Vanessa, one to their attorney Harold Simmons, and one to a number we haven't identified yet. Dominic nodded, though Leo couldn't see him. Keep monitoring all of them. I want to know about any unusual movements or contacts. After ending the call, Dominic reviewed the comprehensive strategy document he'd created during the last week in Berlin. The plan was divided into 3 phases. Phase 1, isolation. Phase 2, revelation. Phase 3, resolution. Phase 1 was already in motion. He had cut off Vanessa's access to joint funds and filed for divorce with the adultery evidence Leo had collected. He had initiated the lawsuit against his parents for the illegal sale of his car. He had removed himself physically from all 3 primary antagonists while maintaining surveillance on their activities. The goal of this phase was to create separation and prevent them from coordinating effectively against him. For Phase 2, timing would be crucial. Dominic needed certain pieces to fall into place before proceeding, which meant exercising strategic patience, a quality that had served him well throughout his career. The next morning, Dominic met with his attorney, Sonia Rodriguez, a shark-like divorce lawyer known for her meticulous preparation and ruthless courtroom tactics. They've already reached out, Sonia said as Dominic took a seat in her sleek downtown office. Vanessa's lawyer, James Woodward, called this morning asking to discuss settlement terms. That was fast, Dominic remarked. What did you tell him? That we're not interested in negotiating until full financial disclosure is provided, Sonia replied, adjusting her tortoise-shell glasses, including the $215,000 transfer to Reynolds and any other funds that may have been diverted from marital assets. And my parents? Their attorney filed a motion to dismiss your conversion claim, arguing that Patricia Voss had legal right as co-signer to sell the vehicle. It's weak, but they're hoping a judge might buy it at the preliminary hearing. Dominic nodded, unsurprised. When's the hearing? 2 weeks from Tuesday. Judge Crawford's court. A slight smile crossed Dominic's face. Crawford? That's perfect. Sonia raised an eyebrow. You know her. Our firm designed her vacation home in Nantucket last year. Pro bono, as part of a sustainable housing initiative. Sonia allowed herself a rare smile. That's fortuitous. Things often are when you plan carefully, Dominic replied. Over the next 2 weeks, Dominic maintained his distance from Vanessa and his parents while systematically implementing the elements of Phase 1. He formally notified his firm's clients and partners about his personal situation, getting ahead of any potential gossip or professional fallout. He engaged a forensic accountant to trace all financial transactions from the joint accounts over the past year, documenting every suspicious withdrawal or transfer. Most importantly, he reconnected with key people from his and Vanessa's social circle, friends who had been neglected during his workaholic phase, sharing his side of the story before Vanessa could control the narrative. One such reconnection was with Meredith Dawson, Vanessa's former best friend from college. Their friendship had cooled over the years as Vanessa became increasingly status conscious, viewing Meredith's career as a public defender as beneath her social standing. I always knew there was something off about her relationship with Blake. Meredith confided over coffee in a small cafe away from their usual social haunts. They met at that legal aid fundraiser last fall, the one you couldn't attend because of the Chicago Project. The Chicago Project? Dominic frowned. That was over 10 months ago. Leo's timeline had their affair starting 8 months ago. Meredith shook her head. No, they were definitely involved before that. Blake was all she talked about from at least October. I remember because she canceled our traditional Halloween movie marathon to attend some finance industry party with him. This new information shifted Dominic's understanding of the timeline, suggesting the betrayal had begun even earlier than he'd thought. It also meant Vanessa had been lying to Leo's sources about when the affair started, perhaps trying to minimize her culpability. There's something else you should know, Meredith added, lowering her voice. About 6 months ago, Vanessa asked me some strange legal questions about transferring property between spouses, hiding assets during divorce proceedings, that kind of thing. I thought it was for one of her clients, but now you think she was planning this all along, Dominic finished the thought. Meredith nodded, her expression troubled. I'm sorry, Dom. I should have said something, but I honestly didn't connect the dots until you called me yesterday. This conversation with Meredith provided Dominic with crucial insight. Vanessa hadn't merely succumbed to temptation while he was absent. She had been strategically planning to leave him for months, possibly coordinating with Blake to maximize her financial position before doing so. As the preliminary hearing for the conversion lawsuit approached, Dominic received another piece of unexpected intelligence from Leo. Your father made a series of calls to someone named Russell Jenkins, Leo reported. He's a classic car dealer in Connecticut, the same one who bought your Shelby. What were they discussing? Dominic asked. Apparently, Jenkins is unhappy. The car had some issues that weren't disclosed at the time of sale, something about frame damage that had been concealed during restoration. He's threatening to sue your parents for fraudulent misrepresentation unless they refund $75,000 of the purchase price. Dominic's expression darkened. That's impossible. There was no frame damage. I documented every step of the restoration with photographs and inspection certificates. That's what makes it interesting, Leo said. I managed to get copies of the inspection report Jenkins is referring to. The damage wasn't there when you owned the car. It happened during transport after the sale. This revelation added a new dimension to Dominic's strategy. Someone, likely Blake, given his financial expertise, had engineered a situation where the car's value would be diminished after sale, creating leverage to force Dominic's parents to accept a reduced price. It was clever, manipulative, and entirely illegal. Give me everything on Jenkins, Dominic instructed, and find out who transported the car after the sale. The day before the hearing, Dominic received a text from an unknown number. We should talk. Coffee at Meridian. For PM? Blake. Dominic stared at the message for a long moment, considering the implications. Blake Reynolds was reaching out directly, bypassing lawyers and intermediaries. It could be a trap, an attempt to provoke a confrontation that would undermine Dominic's legal position. It could also be genuine. Perhaps Blake was having second thoughts about his alliance with Vanessa. Either way, it was an opportunity Dominic couldn't ignore. He texted back a single word, confirmed. The Meridian Cafe was deliberately neutral territory, an upscale coffee shop in Boston's financial district, populated by professionals too absorbed in their own affairs to pay attention to two men having a quiet conversation in the corner. Blake Reynolds looked exactly as his photograph suggested. Tall, athletic, with the polished good looks of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, his confident posture revealing a man accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "Dominic," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for meeting me." Dominic ignored the outstretched hand, taking a seat across for Blake. "Let's skip the pleasantries. What do you want?" Blake withdrew his hand, his expression shifting from forced cordiality to businesslike efficiency. "I want to resolve this situation without unnecessary complications for any of us." "By situation, you mean the fact that you're sleeping with my wife, accepted stolen property in the form of money from my car, and are facing potential ethical violations at Corwin Capital?" Dominic asked mildly. Blake's jaw tightened momentarily before he regained his composure. "Look, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But dragging this through the courts won't benefit anyone." "It'll benefit me," Dominic replied. "I'll get justice for the theft of my property and the breach of my marriage vows." "At what cost?" Blake countered. "Your parents are in their 70s. Do you really want to put them through a lawsuit? And Vanessa, whatever happened between you two, do you want her reputation destroyed in a public divorce proceeding?" Dominic studied Blake's face, noting the careful neutrality of his expression. "This isn't concern for my family. This is concern for yourself. Corwin Capital has a zero-tolerance policy for executives involved in scandal. If this goes public, you'll lose your position, maybe even your professional reputation." A flicker of genuine alarm crossed Blake's features before he controlled it. "I'm offering a solution that works for everyone. Vanessa returns the money from the car sale. Your parents apologize and make financial restitution. You drop the lawsuits. We all move on with our lives. And you get to keep your job and my wife," Dominic observed. "Convenient. She wasn't happy with you," Blake said, an edge entering his voice. "She hasn't been for years. And yet she stayed married to me while sleeping with you and planning to steal from me," Dominic replied evenly. "What does that say about her character? About yours?" Blake leaned forward, dropping all pretense of friendly negotiation. "Listen carefully. You're not the only one with resources and connections. If you push this, things will get ugly. Not just in court, but in ways you can't anticipate." "Is that a threat?" Dominic asked, his expression unchanged. "It's a reality check," Blake replied. "Think about my offer. You have until the hearing tomorrow to decide." As Blake stood to leave, Dominic remained seated, his voice stopping the other man before he could walk away. "One question, Blake. The frame damage to the Shelby, was that your idea or Vanessa's?" Blake froze momentarily, his back to Dominic. Without turning, he said, "I don't know what you're talking about," and continued toward the door. Dominic watched him leave, then took out his phone and sent a text to Leo. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Chapter 6, Count to Moves. The morning of the preliminary hearing dawned bright and clear, a perfect New England autumn day that belied the storm about to break in Judge Crawford's courtroom. Dominic arrived early, dressed in a conservative navy suit that projected quiet confidence without ostentation. Sonia Rodriguez met him at the courthouse steps, her expression grimly satisfied. "Everything's in place," she confirmed. "The documentation from Jenkins, the transport company records, the original restoration certificates. And our special witness is ready." Dominic nodded, allowing himself a small smile. "And the other matter?" "Handled yesterday afternoon. The board received the anonymous package with full documentation. According to my source, they've called an emergency session for this afternoon." Inside the courtroom, Dominic wasn't surprised to find his parents already seated with their attorney, Harold Simmons, a rumpled, grandfatherly man whose folksy demeanor masked a shrewd legal mind. What did surprise him was Vanessa's presence beside them, whispering urgently to his mother. She hadn't been named in the conversion lawsuit, yet here she was, inserting herself into the proceedings. More interesting was who wasn't present, Blake Reynolds. After his confrontational coffee meeting with Dominic, he had apparently decided to distance himself from the legal proceedings. It was the first indication that Dominic's strategy was working, creating fractures in the alliance against him. Judge Crawford entered, and the proceedings began with Simmons presenting the motion to dismiss. His argument was straightforward. Patricia Voss, as co-signer on the insurance, had legal authority to sell the vehicle. The sale had been conducted properly, with all appropriate paperwork filed. The motion should be granted, and the case dismissed. Sonia countered forcefully, presenting documentation showing that Patricia's co-signer status was limited to liability coverage in case of Dominic's incapacitation, not ownership rights. She highlighted the suspicious timing of the sale, immediately after Dominic's departure for a long-term overseas assignment, and the failure to consult him despite multiple opportunities to do so. As the arguments proceeded, Dominic observed his mother's expression growing increasingly troubled. Theodore sat stoically beside her, his face betraying nothing, but his white-knuckled grip on the courtroom bench told a different story. The tide turned decisively when Sonia introduced the evidence about the alleged frame damage. Your Honor, we have documentation proving that the Shelby GT 500 was in perfect condition when it left Mr. Voss's possession. The supposed damage that led to Mr. Jenkins threatening litigation against the defendants occurred during transport. Transport arranged not by the defendants, but by a third party, Blake Reynolds, the paramour of Mr. Voss's wife, Vanessa. Simmons rose immediately. Objection, Your Honor. Mrs. Voss's personal relationships are irrelevant to this proceeding and not named in the complaint. On the contrary, Sonia countered, they go directly to motive and conspiracy. We have evidence that the sale of the vehicle, the intentional damage during transport, and the subsequent financial transactions were part of a coordinated effort to deprive Mr. Voss of his property and transfer those assets to fund Mrs. Voss's relationship with Mr. Reynolds. Judge Crawford's expression sharpened with interest. I'll allow it. Please continue, Ms. Rodriguez. Sonia then called their surprise witness, Damon Torres, the transport driver who had moved to Shelby from Boston to Connecticut. Under oath, Torres testified that he had been approached by Blake Reynolds with an offer of $5,000 to accidentally damage the vehicle during transport in a way that wouldn't be immediately noticeable, but would affect its value and safety certification. He said it was some kind of insurance thing, Torres explained, that the owner was trying to inflate the car's value, and this would even things out. I didn't know it was stolen property. By the time Torres finished his testimony, the courtroom atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Judge Crawford denied the motion to dismiss and set a trial date for the full case, but not before issuing a preliminary injunction freezing the remaining funds from the car sale in Vanessa's accounts. As they left the courtroom, Dominic noticed his father approaching, leaving Patricia and Vanessa behind. Theodore's face was ashen, his usual blustering confidence replaced by something Dominic had never seen before, uncertainty. Can we talk? Theodore asked, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Alone, Dominic glanced at Sonia, who nodded slightly before walking ahead to give them privacy. I didn't know, Theodore said once they were relatively isolated in the courthouse corridor. About the car damage, about Blake Reynolds arranging it. None of it. Your mother said we were helping Vanessa secure her future because you were neglecting her. I believed her. You believed I deserved to have my property stolen? Dominic asked, keeping his voice level. Theodore shook his head, suddenly looking every one of his 72 years. I believe you were making the same mistakes I did, putting work before family. I spent my whole life that way, and it cost me everything that mattered. The unexpected vulnerability in his father's admission caught Dominic off guard. What are you saying, Dad? I'm saying I was wrong, Theodore replied, the words clearly difficult for him. About you, about this situation. Your mother convinced me that you were just like me, stubborn, work-obsessed, emotionally unavailable. But what I saw in there today, that wasn't about work or money. That was calculated betrayal. Dominic studied his father's face, searching for signs of manipulation or deception, but found only genuine distress. You need to talk to your attorney, he said finally. If you weren't aware of the fraud involving the car damage, that should be on the record. I will, Theodore nodded. But I wanted you to know first. Whatever happens with the lawsuit, whatever you decide, I understand now. As his father walked away, Dominic felt the first faint crack in his resolve. The plan he had so carefully constructed didn't account for genuine remorse or the possibility of reconciliation with his father. It was an unpredicted variable that would require adjustment to his strategy. That adjustment came sooner than expected. As Dominic and Sonia exited the courthouse, they found Vanessa waiting on the steps, alone and visibly agitated. "You set this up," she accused, stepping directly into Dominic's path. "You knew about the transport driver, about Blake arranging the damage. You've been playing us all along." "No, Vanessa," Dominic replied calmly. "You set this up when you decided to steal from me and betray our marriage. I'm just making sure everyone faces the consequences of their choices, including you." "Blake's been called to an emergency board meeting at Corwin," Vanessa said, her voice tight with suppressed fury. "Someone sent them documentation about our relationship, about the money from the car. They're talking about termination for ethical violations." "How unfortunate," Dominic remarked without sympathy. Perhaps Blake should have considered the professional implications before accepting funds from a fraudulent transaction. Vanessa's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "You're destroying everything. My reputation, Blake's career, your parents' retirement. All because of your wounded pride and that stupid car." "No, Vanessa," Dominic corrected her, his voice hardening. "This isn't about pride or even the car. It's about justice. You conspired to steal from me while I was working to build our future. You engaged my parents in your scheme. You manipulated and deceived everyone involved. Those actions have consequences. What do you want?" Vanessa demanded, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Money? The house. What will it take to end this?" Dominic regarded her coolly. "Phase 2 is just beginning, Vanessa. You'll know what I want when the time comes." As he walked away with Sonia, leaving Vanessa standing alone on the courthouse steps, Dominic felt neither triumph nor satisfaction, only the cold clarity of purpose. Phase 2. Revelation was unfolding perfectly, exposing the truth not just to the court but to all participants in the betrayal. The cracks in their alliance were widening, and soon they would shatter completely. That evening, Leo reported that Blake Reynolds had indeed been suspended pending investigation by Corwin Capital's board. Theodore had contacted his own separate attorney, distancing himself from Patricia's legal strategy. And Vanessa had moved out of Blake's townhouse after a heated argument witnessed by neighbors. Phase 3. Resolution was approaching faster than Dominic had anticipated. It was time to prepare the final pieces of his plan, the ones he had set in motion during those crucial extra days in Berlin, when he had realized that simple legal victory would not be enough to truly balance the scales of justice. Chapter 7. The Architect's Gambit. 3 days after the preliminary hearing, Dominic stood in the newly established offices of Voss Design Group, a sleek, minimalist space in downtown Boston that represented both continuity and new beginnings. He had amicably separated from his partnership with Garrett, maintaining joint ownership of their existing projects while establishing his own firm to pursue the innovative, sustainable design concepts that had become his passion. The Berlin project had been a resounding success, leading to 3 additional European commissions that would ensure the new firm's financial stability for at least the next 2 years. More importantly, the professional restructuring had allowed Dominic to implement certain financial arrangements that would prove crucial to Phase 3 of his plan. Garrett visited the new office that afternoon, his expression a mixture of admiration and concern as he took in the space. "It looks great, Dom, but are you sure this is the right time for such a major change? With everything else going on?" "It's exactly the right time," Dominic replied, offering his friend and former partner a cup of coffee. Clear separation between past and future. Garrett accepted the coffee, studying Dominic's face. "You seem different, calmer somehow despite the chaos." "Clarity has that effect," Dominic said. "When you know exactly what needs to be done, everything becomes simpler." After Garrett left, Dominic turned his attention to the final preparations for Phase 3. The legal proceedings were proceeding as expected. His parents' attorney had approached Sonia about settlement terms for the conversion lawsuit, and the divorce petition had been formally served to Vanessa. But these were merely the public-facing elements of his strategy. The private elements were far more intricate and potentially devastating. Leo arrived at 6 p.m. with the latest intelligence. Blake Reynolds met with the Corwin board this morning. They've extended his suspension for another 2 weeks while they investigate the ethical implications of his relationship with Vanessa and the financial transactions involving the car sale. And Vanessa? She's staying at the Harrington Hotel on Boylston. She's made appointments with 3 different divorce attorneys in the past 2 days, apparently unhappy with her current representation. She also tried to access your joint investment account, but the freeze prevented any withdrawals. Dominic nodded, processing this information. My parents. That's where it gets interesting, Leo said, opening his laptop to show Dominic's surveillance photos. They've had a series of heated arguments. Your father left the house yesterday with a suitcase and checked into the Bayside Motel. Based on our audio, he's furious about your mother's role in the car sale, especially after learning about the damage scheme. This development was unexpected, but potentially useful. The fracturing of relationships among all the conspirators created vulnerabilities Dominic could exploit in the final phase. What about the property in New Hampshire? Dominic asked. Leo pulled up a different file. Construction is complete. The isolation modifications you requested have been implemented. It's fully functioning, but completely off-grid as specified. Perfect, Dominic said, a cold smile playing at the corners of his mouth. And the financial transfers? All done through the shell corporations we established. Untraceable back to you, as requested. Dominic nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. It's time to extend the invitations. The invitations were simple but effective. Formal cards delivered by courier to Theodore, Patricia, Vanessa, and Blake, requesting their presence at a settlement discussion at Dominic's new office space the following evening at 8 p.m. Each invitation was personalized, emphasizing different aspects of potential resolution that would appeal to the recipient's specific concerns. For Theodore, the promise of family reconciliation. For Patricia, financial security. For Vanessa, a swift and private divorce settlement. For Blake, assistance with his Corwin Capital situation. Each had reason to attend, and each would find it difficult to refuse given their increasingly precarious positions. The stage was set. All that remained was for the players to arrive. At precisely 8 p.m. the following evening, Dominic waited in the conference room of Voss Design Group. The space had been carefully arranged. A round table with 5 chairs, each position meticulously prepared with relevant documents. The lighting was subdued but focused, creating an atmosphere of serious negotiation. Theodore arrived first, 15 minutes early and visibly uncomfortable in formal attire that hung slightly loose on his frame. He had lost weight in the weeks since the confrontation. Dominic, he greeted cautiously. Thank you for the invitation. Dad, Dominic acknowledged with a nod. Please take a seat. The others will be here shortly. Patricia arrived next, her expression guarded as she took in the space and the presence of her estranged husband. She had clearly made an effort with her appearance, wearing an expensive dress that Dominic recognized as new. You've done well for yourself, she remarked, gesturing to the office. It's impressive. Thank you, Dominic replied neutrally. Your seat is there, with a blue folder. Vanessa and Blake arrived together, though their body language suggested tension rather than unity. Blake looked haggard, the strain of his professional uncertainty evident in the shadows beneath his eyes and the slight disarray of his usually immaculate appearance. Let's get this over with, Vanessa said without preamble, taking her designated seat. Once all were seated, Dominic remained standing, commanding the room from his position at the head of the table. Thank you all for coming. I've invited you here to discuss resolution of our various legal and personal conflicts. Our attorneys should be present for any settlement discussions. Blake interjected immediately. This isn't a formal negotiation, Dominic clarified. It's a presentation of options. You're all free to consult with your legal counsel before making any decisions. He opened a sleek presentation remote, and the wall behind him illuminated with a projected image, a photograph of his Shelby GT 500 gleaming in the sunlight of his garage. Let's begin with the catalyst for our current situation, Dominic said, his voice taking on the professional tone he used for client presentations. My 1967 Shelby GT500, valued at approximately $425,000 before the intentional damage during transport reduced its value to roughly $350,000. He clicked to the next slide. A series of bank transfers highlighting the money trail from the car sale to Vanessa's account to Blake's. The financial transactions are clear and well documented. $285,000 from the sale transferred to Vanessa's personal account, with $215,000 subsequently transferred to Blake for the purchase of an engagement ring valued at $198,000. The remaining $70,000 was spent by Vanessa on various luxury items and cash withdrawals. Another click, another slide, this one showing the Instagram post of Vanessa's hand with the enormous diamond ring. The evidence of conspiracy and conversion of property is overwhelming, Dominic continued, as is the evidence of adultery for the divorce proceedings. In any court case, you would all lose badly. Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. We're here to discuss settlement, not rehash the accusations. I'm establishing context, Dominic replied calmly, because what I'm offering isn't a standard legal settlement. It's something more comprehensive. The next slide showed architectural renderings of a stunning contemporary house set against a mountainous backdrop. This is Black Pine Lodge, a property I've recently acquired in northern New Hampshire. Completely self-sufficient, off-grid, with state-of-the-art, sustainable systems and security features. Blake frowned, confusion evident in his expression. What does a vacation house have to do with our settlement? It's not a vacation house, Dominic corrected. It's an alternative to legal proceedings. He clicked to the next slide, displaying 4 separate documents with each of their names. I'm offering each of you a choice. Option 1. Sign these non-disclosure and settlement agreements, which include fair but not generous financial terms, and walk away from all of this with your public reputations intact, though significantly poorer. And Option 2, Theodore asked, his voice hesitant. Dominic's expression hardened slightly. Option 2 is more complex. It involves a temporary relocation to Black Pine Lodge, where you will participate in what I'm calling a reparation program of my design. Upon successful completion, you'll each receive significantly better financial terms and assistance with rebuilding what you've lost: careers, relationships, security. The room fell silent as the implications of his offer sank in. It was Vanessa who finally broke the silence, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Are you suggesting we voluntarily go to some remote location under your control? That's insane. Is it? Dominic countered. Blake is facing termination from Corwin Capital and potential industry blacklisting. You're about to lose most of your assets in the divorce and have alienated much of your social circle. My parents are facing financial ruin from the lawsuit and have destroyed their relationship in the process. Compared to those outcomes, a short period of discomfort might seem quite reasonable. This is kidnapping, Blake said, rising from his chair. We could have you arrested for even suggesting it. No, Dominic replied calmly. It's a voluntary arrangement with signed consent forms and legal documentation. Nothing would happen at Black Pine Lodge that you didn't agree to in advance. And there would be significant compensation upon completion. What exactly would this reparation program involve? Theodore asked, his expression troubled but curious. A series of challenges and tasks designed to provide genuine insight into the damage your actions caused, Dominic explained. Some physical, some psychological, all carefully constructed to be challenging but not harmful. Think of it as restorative justice rather than punishment. Patricia scoffed. And we're supposed to trust you not to seek revenge once you have us isolated in the middle of nowhere. You're right not to trust me, Dominic acknowledged. That's why everything would be documented and monitored by a neutral third party. Leo Blackwood, my investigator, would oversee the program to ensure compliance with the agreed-upon terms. The room fell silent again as each person processed the bizarre proposal. It was Theodore who spoke first, his voice resigned. How long would this program last? 30 days, Dominic answered, after which, regardless of your performance, you would be free to leave. The financial compensation depends on successful completion of assigned tasks. And if we all choose option 1, the standard settlement, Vanessa asked, then we proceed with the legal process. Dominic said simply, the divorce, the conversion lawsuit, the potential criminal charges for the intentional damage to the vehicle. It will take years, cost all of you far more than you've already lost, and permanently damage your reputations and relationships. Blake shook his head in disbelief. This is coercion. This is opportunity, Dominic corrected. A chance to resolve everything quickly with better terms than you deserve, in exchange for experiencing a fraction of the pain you collectively caused me. He placed 4 identical envelopes on the table. Inside each envelope is a key to Black Pine Lodge and consent forms for the program. You have 24 hours to decide. Those who choose option 2 should arrive at the lodge by noon on Saturday. Those who don't will receive standard settlement papers from my attorneys on Monday morning. With that, Dominic left the conference room, leaving the 4 conspirators staring at the envelopes in stunned silence. As he walked to his private office, Leo fell in a step beside him. Do you think they'll do it? Leo asked quietly. Some will, some won't, Dominic replied. It doesn't matter. The real purpose was to present them with an impossible choice, to make them feel the same loss of control I felt when I discovered their betrayal. Phase 3 was now in motion. Whether they chose the lodge or the legal battle, Dominic had reclaimed the narrative. The architect of deception had become the architect of justice. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold as Dominic made the 3-hour drive to Black Pine Lodge. The property was deliberately remote, accessible by a single private road that wound through dense forest before opening onto a stunning vista of mountains and a crystal-clear lake. The lodge itself was a masterpiece of contemporary design integrated with its natural surroundings, all glass, stone, and sustainable materials. Leo was already there, having arrived the previous evening to prepare the systems and monitoring equipment. Security perimeter is active, he reported as Dominic entered the great room with its soaring ceilings and panoramic views. All cameras and sensors operational. If anyone approaches within 5 miles, we'll know. Any word from our guests? Dominic asked, setting down his bag. Theodore confirmed he's coming. Left home at 6 a.m. according to the tracker. Should arrive within the hour, Leo replied, checking his tablet. No direct confirmation from the others yet. Dominic nodded, unsurprised that his father had chosen option 2. Theodore had always been practical, and the financial advantages of the program would be significant compared to the legal settlement. The rooms are prepared according to your specifications, Leo continued, each with the personalized materials and challenges you designed. Perfect, Dominic said, moving to the kitchen to prepare coffee. Now we wait. Theodore arrived first. As predicted, his expression a mixture of resignation and determination as he entered the lodge. This place is not what I expected, he admitted, taking in the luxurious yet understated surroundings. What did you expect? Dominic asked, offering his father coffee. Something more like a prison, I suppose, Theodore replied honestly, accepting the cup. Given the circumstances. The purpose isn't punishment, Dad, Dominic said. It's understanding. Your room is the first on the left down that hallway. The introductory materials are on the desk. Leo will go over the general rules and schedule once everyone arrives, if they arrive. To Dominic's mild surprise, Patricia was the next to appear, arriving alone in a taxi that Leo had arranged from the nearest town. She looked smaller somehow, diminished without the protective armor of her familiar surroundings and routines. Theodore left without telling me, she said by way of greeting. I found your envelope open on the kitchen table. Yet here you are, Dominic observed. The financial terms were persuasive, Patricia admitted. And I suppose part of me wants to understand what drove you to arrange all this. Vanessa arrived third, alone and visibly tense, her designer luggage incongruous in the rustic setting. She avoided direct eye contact with Dominic, speaking instead to Leo about practical arrangements and room assignments. It was late afternoon when Leo's tablet alerted them to the final arrival. Blake Reynolds pulled up in a rental SUV, his expression unreadable as he entered the lodge. He had clearly struggled with the decision. His normally impeccable appearance was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot from either lack of sleep or excessive drinking. "I want it on record that I'm here under protest," Blake announced to the room at large. "And I expect full compensation as outlined in the agreement." "Noted," Leo replied professionally. "Your room is the last one on the right. Please review the materials there before our orientation dinner at 6 p.m. With all 4 guests now installed in their rooms, Dominic retreated to the lodge's office to monitor their initial reactions through the discrete cameras. Each room contained a personalized welcome package with specific instructions and the first of the challenges they would face. Theodore sat at his desk, reading through every document, his expression growing increasingly troubled. Patricia paced her room nervously before finally opening her folder. Vanessa immediately began searching for surveillance devices, her suspicion evident in every movement. Blake sprawled on the bed, leafing through the materials with apparent disinterest that didn't quite mask his underlying anxiety. At precisely 6 p.m., all 4 gathered in the dining room where Leo had prepared a simple but elegant meal. Dominic remained in the office, watching through the cameras as Leo explained the structure of the program. For the next 30 days, you will each complete a series of tasks designed by Dominic to provide insight into specific aspects of the harm caused by your actions, Leo began, his tone professional and detached. Some tasks will be individual, others collaborative. Successful completion results in financial compensation as outlined in your agreements. And if we refuse a task, Blake asked, his fork poised over his untouched salmon. That's your right, Leo replied, but it affects your final compensation package. Think of it as a points system. Each completed task accrues points toward your ultimate settlement amount. This is psychological torture, Vanessa muttered. No, Mrs. Voss, Leo corrected firmly. Psychological torture would be what you did to Dominic, conspiring behind his back, gaslighting him about your activities, stealing his property, and mocking him afterward. This is a voluntary program with clear parameters and objectives. The dinner proceeded in uncomfortable silence after that exchange. Dominic observed each participant closely, noted Theodore's resigned compliance, Patricia's nervous fidgeting, Vanessa's barely contained fury, and Blake's calculated assessment of the situation. The first week of the program unfolded according to Dominic's careful design. Each morning, participants received their daily task assignment, ranging from physically demanding work around the property to emotionally challenging exercises in self-reflection and accountability. Theodore approached each task with grim determination, completing even the most difficult physical labor without complaint. His first major challenge, restoring a classic car engine similar to the one from Dominic Shelby, seemed to affect him deeply, his hands trembling as he worked meticulously on each component. Patricia struggled with the physical tasks, but showed unexpected insight during the reflection exercises, particularly when asked to write a detailed account of the planning meetings she'd had with Vanessa about selling the car. Her written confession revealed that she had indeed been the instigator, driven by decades of resentment over Dominic's rejection of her life plans for him. Vanessa alternated between defiant refusal and grudging participation, calculating which tasks offered the best return on investment for her settlement. Her strategy became evident when she enthusiastically tackled high-value tasks while neglecting others, regardless of difficulty. Blake proved the most resistant, refusing several tasks outright despite the financial penalties. His breaking point came during the first collaborative challenge, a simulated business negotiation where the 4 participants had to reach consensus on a complex ethical dilemma. His attempt to manipulate the others backfired when Theodore unexpectedly called him out for using the same tactics he'd employed in convincing them to sell Dominic's car. By the end of the first week, the dynamics had shifted noticeably. Theodore and Patricia had stopped speaking to each other entirely after a particularly revealing therapy exercise. Vanessa had begun spending more time alone, her initial confidence visibly eroding. And Blake had started making private overtures to each of the others, trying to form alliances against what he termed Dominic's psychological games. Dominic himself maintained his distance, appearing only via video conference for specific exercises that required his participation. His detachment was deliberate, allowing the natural consequences of their actions and interactions to unfold without his direct influence. It was during the second week that the first significant breakthrough occurred. Theodore requested a private meeting with Dominic, bypassing Leo as intermediary. They met on the lodge's expansive deck overlooking the lake, the evening air crisp with approaching autumn. Theodore looked older than his years, the program's rigors having stripped away his usual bluster to reveal the vulnerability beneath. "I understand now," Theodore said without preamble, "what the car meant to you. It wasn't just a vehicle or an investment. It was something you built, something you controlled in a life where so much was beyond your control." Dominic remained silent, allowing his father to continue. "That engine restoration task, it showed me what you experienced. The patience, the precision, the satisfaction of seeing something broken become whole again through your own efforts." Theodore's voice cracked slightly. "When your mother and Vanessa approached me about selling it, I told myself it was just a car, an indulgence, something replaceable." "It wasn't," Dominic said simply. "No," Theodore agreed. "It was a betrayal of everything you'd built, everything you valued. And I participated in that betrayal because it was easier than standing up to your mother, easier than acknowledging that you had created a life I secretly envied, one built on passion rather than practicality." The admission hung in the air between them, more powerful than any scripted apology could have been. Dominic found himself at a crossroads. Stick to the calculated plan of distant observation, or engage with this unexpected moment of genuine connection. "Why did you stay with her?" Dominic asked, the question emerging from a place of genuine curiosity rather than accusation. "All these years, when it's clear you've been unhappy." Theodore gazed out at the darkening lake. "Same reason you stayed with Vanessa long after the relationship had soured. Fear of failure, fear of starting over, fear that the devil you know is better than the one you don't." Dominic nodded, recognizing the truth in his father's words. For all their differences, they shared this fundamental flaw, the stubborn persistence in situations that no longer serve them. "I'm filing for divorce," Theodore said quietly, "when this is over, regardless of the financial outcome." "Are you sure that's what you want?" Dominic asked. "It's what I should have done 20 years ago," Theodore replied with surprising firmness. "Your program here, it's given me clarity I didn't expect. Painful clarity, but necessary." As his father returned to the lodge, Dominic remained on the deck, contemplating this unexpected development. The program was working, but not precisely as he had anticipated. He had designed it to force recognition and repentance. But Theodore had found something beyond that, a path forward that Dominic himself hadn't considered. The next breakthrough came from a less expected source. Blake Reynolds, who had maintained his resistant stance throughout the program, approached Leo with a proposition on the 10th day. "I want to speak with Dominic directly," Blake requested. "Off camera, no recordings." Dominic agreed, meeting Blake in the neutral territory of the lodge's library, a space deliberately designed without surveillance equipment. "Your program is clever," Blake began, dispensing with pleasantries. "Psychologically sophisticated. Did you design it yourself, or hire consultants?" "Does it matter?" Dominic countered. "It matters because I'm trying to understand what you really want," Blake replied. "This elaborate setup, the tasks, the monitoring, it's excessive for mere revenge. You could have destroyed us all legally without this theatrical production." Dominic studied the man who had participated in the dismantling of his marriage and theft of his property. Blake was perceptive, more so than Dominic had given him credit for. "What do you think I want?" Dominic asked. "Control," Blake answered immediately. "Not money, not punishment, not even justice in the conventional sense. You want to reclaim the control that was taken from you when we acted without your knowledge or consent." Dominic allowed a small nod of acknowledgement. "Perceptive. I understand control," Blake continued. "It's what drives me too. Why do you think I damaged the car after purchase? It wasn't just about reducing the price. It was about asserting dominance over something you valued, making it mine in a way it never could have been otherwise. The admission of calculated malice should have angered Dominic, but instead, he found himself appreciating the honesty. Yet here you are, voluntarily surrendering control by participating in my program. Blake smiled thinly, because sometimes surrendering apparent control is the best way to maintain actual control. I'm here to minimize financial damage and expedite resolution. Every day spent here is a day I'm not spending in depositions or court proceedings. A pragmatic approach, Dominic acknowledged. I propose we cut through the remaining charade, Blake said, leaning forward. Name your actual price for ending this, for me specifically. Not the settlement amount in the agreement, but what you really want from me personally. Dominic considered the offer. There is something, actually, but it's not what you think. Try me, Blake challenged. A public statement, Dominic said. Admitting your role in the car damage scheme, clearing my parents of direct involvement in that aspect. They're still accountable for the sale itself, but the fraud was your initiative. Blake's expression registered surprise, then calculation. That would have professional implications beyond what I'm already facing. Yes, Dominic agreed. It would. Why would you care about partitioning blame properly? Blake asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. You hate all of us equally, I assumed. Hate is exhausting, Dominic replied simply. An inaccurate attribution of responsibility doesn't serve justice or resolution. Blake studied him for a long moment. I'll consider it, but I want full immunity from any further civil or criminal proceedings if I provide this statement. I can arrange that, Dominic said. My attorney will draw up the agreement. As Blake left the library, Dominic realized that his original plan for Phase 3 was evolving in ways he hadn't anticipated. The rigid structure of punishment and restitution he had designed was giving way to something more organic, a process of natural consequences and authentic reckonings that might ultimately prove more effective than his calculated scenarios. Patricia was the next to approach him on the 14th day of the program. Unlike Theodore's humble insight or Blake's pragmatic negotiation, Patricia's demeanor remained defensive and self-justifying. This program is cruel, Dominic, she began as they walked the property's perimeter trail. Designed to humiliate and break us down. Is that how you experience it? Dominic asked neutrally. Of course it is. Making me scrub floors like a servant, write confession essays like a child, participate in those invasive therapy sessions. It's degrading. Interesting that you find honest work and self-reflection degrading, Dominic observed. What would you consider an appropriate consequence for selling someone's property without permission and using the money to finance their spouse's affair? Patricia's pace faltered slightly. We thought we were helping Vanessa. By stealing from me? By giving her options? Patricia snapped. She was miserable with you, Dominic. Lonely and neglected. When she came to us about Blake, about wanting to leave, but feeling financially trapped. She had a successful real estate career, Dominic interrupted. Her own savings. A prenuptial agreement that would have given her significant assets in a divorce. She wasn't trapped, financially or otherwise. Patricia fell silent for several steps. Perhaps we wanted to believe she was, she finally admitted, because it justified our actions. It was the closest thing to an honest acknowledgement that Patricia had offered since the program began. Dominic recognized it as progress, however small. Your task tomorrow involves reviewing the financial impact of your actions, Dominic said as they completed the circuit back to the lodge. I suggest you approach it with the same honesty you just demonstrated. As the program passed its halfway point, the dynamics among the participants continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Theodore and Patricia maintained their distance from each other, but both had begun showing genuine engagement with the process. Blake oscillated between strategic compliance and calculated resistance, constantly assessing which approach would best serve his interests. And Vanessa remained the most enigmatic participant. She completed tasks with technical proficiency but emotional detachment, as if going through the motions without allowing the experience to penetrate her carefully constructed defenses. It wasn't until the 20th day that Dominic finally understood why. Leo brought him the evidence, a series of text messages Vanessa had managed to send despite the lodge's restricted communications. She had been in contact with an attorney throughout the program, documenting everything as potential evidence for a countersuit alleging coercion and emotional distress. Rather than confronting her directly, Dominic decided on a different approach. For the next day's task, he assigned Vanessa a special challenge, auditing the financial records of their marriage for the past 3 years, including all accounts she thought were private. The records Leo provided included documentation of funds Vanessa had been siphoning from their joint accounts for over 2 years, small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums as her relationship with Blake progressed. More damning were the records of a separate account she had established 18 months earlier, funded by loans from Blake that coincided with key information about Dominic's business deals being shared with Blake's financial clients. She had been selling Dominic's proprietary business information long before the affair became physical, a betrayal more calculated and damaging than even Dominic had suspected. When confronted with this evidence during that evening's group session, Vanessa's carefully maintained facade finally cracked. "You were never supposed to find out," she burst out, her composure dissolving into raw fury. "Any of it. The plan was perfect. You'd be in Berlin for months. The divorce would be filed while you were away. Everything would be settled by the time you returned. Why the elaborate scheme?" Dominic asked calmly. "Why not simply file for divorce and move on?" "Because you didn't deserve half of what you had." Vanessa's voice rose with genuine emotion for the first time. "You were oblivious, Dominic. To me, to us, to everything that wasn't your precious work or that stupid car. Do you know how many nights I spent alone while you were in the garage or at the office? How many events I attended solo, making excuses for your absence? That justifies theft and corporate espionage." Theodore interjected, his disgust evident. "It justifies rebalancing the scales," Vanessa insisted. "Blake recognized my value even when you didn't, Dominic. He appreciated my insights, my connections. We were partners in a way you and I never were." "Partners in crime," Patricia murmured, earning a venomous glare from Vanessa. "Don't pretend you're innocent in this." Vanessa snapped at her former mother-in-law. "You were eager to help when I approached you about the car. You said Dominic had always been selfish, just like his grandmother, that he didn't deserve that ridiculous toy while ignoring his marriage." Patricia flushed but didn't deny the accusation. The truth was finally emerging, raw, ugly, and unvarnished by pretense or justification. As the session devolved into recriminations and counter-accusations, Dominic observed without intervening. This unscripted confrontation was accomplishing what weeks of carefully designed tasks had only begun to approach: genuine accountability in the harsh light of fully exposed truth. When Leo finally called an end to the session, all 4 participants retreated to their rooms, emotionally exhausted and visibly shaken. Dominic reviewed the surveillance footage later that night, noting with interest the aftermath of the confrontation. Theodore sat at his desk, writing steadily in what appeared to be a journal, something he had never done before the program. Patricia lay on her bed, tears streaming silently down her face as she stared at the ceiling. Blake paced his room, making notes and calculations, his strategic mind clearly working through the implications of the new revelations. And Vanessa packed her belongings, her movements precise and controlled despite the emotional upheaval of the evening. She was planning to leave, despite the financial penalties for early termination of the program. Dominic wasn't surprised when Leo knocked on his office door at dawn. "Vanessa's gone," Leo reported. "Left sometime around 4 a.m. Use the emergency exit code I'm required to provide under the agreement terms." Dominic nodded, unsurprised. "Let her go. She's made her choice. Should we notify the others?" "Yes," Dominic decided, "but continue the program as scheduled. We still have 10 days remaining." With Vanessa's departure, the dynamic among the remaining participants shifted once again. Theodore and Patricia cautiously began speaking to each other, united in their disapproval of Vanessa's deeper betrayals. Blake became more openly cooperative, perhaps recognizing that his association with Vanessa had been more damaging than beneficial. The final days of the program focused less on individual culpability and more on constructive restoration. Tasks involved collaborative problem solving, transparent financial accounting, and structured dialogues about moving forward after the program's conclusion. On the 30th and final day, Dominic joined the 3 remaining participants for breakfast in the lodge's dining room. His first direct meal with them since the program began. "You've all completed the program requirements," he began, accepting the coffee Leo poured for him. "Despite Vanessa's early departure, the rest of you have fulfilled your obligations under the agreement." "What happens now?" Patricia asked, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. "Now you receive the agreed-upon compensation and return to your lives," Dominic replied simply. "Transportation has been arranged for this afternoon. The legal documentation nullifying the ongoing lawsuits will be filed tomorrow, as specified in your contracts." "That's it?" Blake asked, clearly surprised by the anticlimactic conclusion. 30 days of psychological boot camp, and we just leave? What were you expecting? Dominic countered. "A dramatic final challenge? A surprise twist?" "Something like that," Blake admitted. Dominic allowed himself a small smile. "The program itself was the twist, Blake. None of you expected to gain actual insight from this experience. You came for financial and legal advantage. Yet here you all are, fundamentally changed by what you've learned about yourselves and each other." Theodore nodded slowly. "It wasn't what any of us anticipated." "Life rarely is," Dominic agreed. "Which brings me to one final matter before we conclude." He removed 3 envelopes from his jacket pocket, sliding one to each participant. "These contain 2 items, a bank transfer confirmation for your compensation amount, and a personal letter from me addressing our relationship moving forward." "You're not going to read them aloud?" Patricia asked, her fingers hesitantly touching the envelope before her. "No," Dominic said. "What happens after today is between me and each of you individually. The program was collective because your actions were collectively orchestrated. The future is separate because each of you must decide your own path forward." As they departed that afternoon, Theodore and Patricia sharing awkward but civil conversation in one car, Blake alone in another, Dominic stood on the lodge's porch with Leo, watching them disappear down the winding road. "Was it worth it?" Leo asked as the dust settled behind the departing vehicles. "All this elaborate planning and execution?" Dominic considered the question carefully. "Not in the way I originally intended," he admitted. "I designed this program as sophisticated revenge, controlled punishment disguised as rehabilitation. What became was something else entirely. Actual rehabilitation?" Leo suggested. "For some of them, perhaps," Dominic agreed. "For others, merely a costly lesson. And for me?" "For you?" Leo prompted when Dominic fell silent. "For me, it was liberation," Dominic finally said. "Not from them, but from the person I might have become if I'd pursued conventional revenge. That path leads to a life defined by bitterness and obsession with past injustices." Leo studied his friend's face. "And now I build," Dominic said simply. "New designs, new relationships, new possibilities unfettered by old resentments." As they turned to re-enter the lodge, Dominic glanced back once more at the empty road. The past was finally receding, and the architect of justice could now become simply an architect again, creating rather than avenging, building rather than breaking down. The price of betrayal had been fully paid by all concerned. Chapter 9. Reconstructions. 6 months after the conclusion of the Black Pine Lodge program, Dominic stood on the observation deck of Boston's newest architectural landmark, the Voss Sustainability Center, a cutting-edge facility showcasing innovative green building technologies. As the project's lead architect and primary investor, he had transformed his Berlin experience into a revolutionary approach to urban design that was garnering international attention. The center's opening gala was in full swing inside, but Dominic had stepped out for a moment of quiet reflection. The past half year had been a period of intense focus and remarkable growth, both professionally and personally. The divorce for Vanessa had been finalized with minimal additional drama. The lawsuits resolved according to the Black Pine agreements, and his professional reputation enhanced rather than damaged by the public aspects of the ordeal. "Quite a view," said a familiar voice behind him. Dominic turned to find Theodore approaching, looking healthier and more relaxed than Dominic had seen him in years. The aftermath of the program had indeed brought significant changes to his father's life. The divorce from Patricia was proceeding amicably, and Theodore had embraced retirement with unexpected enthusiasm, volunteering at a community workshop teaching woodworking to at-risk youth. "Dad," Dominic greeted him warmly. "I didn't think you'd make it tonight. Miss my son's biggest achievement?" Theodore replied with a smile. "Not a chance." They stood side by side, gazing out at the city skyline. The relationship they were building was new territory for both of them. Not the forced intimacy of family obligation, but the chosen connection of two adults finding genuine common ground. "Patricia sends her regards," Theodore said after a comfortable silence. "She wanted to come, but thought it might be awkward for everyone." Dominic nodded, appreciating his mother's rare display of sensitivity. Their relationship remained the most complex of the post-program connections. The letter he had given her at Black Pine had offered conditional forgiveness and limited contact, terms she had respected with unexpected grace. How was she adjusting to the divorce? Dominic asked. "Better than expected," Theodore replied. "She's selling the house, moving to a condo closer to her sister in Providence. The support group seems to be helping her gain perspective." One of the conditions in Patricia's letter had been regular attendance at a therapy group for controlling parents, something Dominic had insisted upon after recognizing the depth of her need to manipulate others' lives. To her credit, she had complied without complaint. "And you?" Dominic asked. "The workshop keeping you busy?" Theodore's expression brightened. "More than busy, fulfilled. Should have started working with my hands decades ago, instead of pushing papers at that soul-crushing insurance company." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Theodore finding joy in manual craftsmanship after years of criticizing Dominic's passion for his car restoration. Some lessons came too late to prevent damage, but just in time to enable healing. As they returned to the gala, Dominic was approached by Garrett, who had remained a trusted friend and occasional collaborator despite their professional separation. "Someone's here to see you," Garrett said quietly. "In the North Atrium." "So it's important." Curious, Dominic made his way through the crowded exhibition space to the quieter atrium area. There, standing beside the living wall of native plants, was Blake Reynolds. Blake had undergone perhaps the most surprising transformation of all the Black Pine participants. After providing the public statement admitting his role in the car damage scheme, he had resigned from Corwin Capital before they could terminate him. Rather than attempting to remain in high finance, he had leveraged his network and expertise to establish an ethics consulting firm focusing on corporate transparency, a career pivot that had raised eyebrows throughout the industry. "Blake," Dominic acknowledged neutrally. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I wasn't sure I'd be welcome," Blake admitted. "But I have something you should see." He handed Dominic a folded document, real estate transfer papers for a property in Connecticut. As Dominic scanned the details, he realized what he was holding. Ownership records for his Shelby GT 500, now legally returned to his name. "How did you manage this?" Dominic asked, genuine surprise evident in his voice. "Jenkins was more reasonable than expected once I explained the situation and offered appropriate compensation," Blake replied. "The car's been fully restored, frame damage properly repaired, all original specifications maintained. It's being delivered to your warehouse space tomorrow morning." Dominic studied the man before him, someone who had participated in one of the most painful betrayals of his life, yet now stood offering unexpected restitution. "Why?" Blake considered the question carefully before answering. "The letter you gave me at Black Pine asked for one thing, that I find a way to make genuine amends, not just financial compensation. This seemed like the most meaningful way to do that." It was true. Unlike the letters to his parents, which had focused on conditions for limited ongoing relationship, Dominic's letter to Blake had been straightforward. No further contact unless it was to make concrete amends for the damage caused. "Thank you," Dominic said simply. "This is unexpected." Blake nodded, turning to leave. "One more thing you should know. Vanessa contacted me last month, wanted to reconnect, suggested we could start fresh now that everything had settled down. And Dominic prompted when Blake paused. I declined, Blake said with a slight smile. Some lessons from Black Pine stuck with me, particularly the one about recognizing patterns of manipulation and deception. As Blake walked away, Dominic felt a weight he hadn't realized he was still carrying finally lift completely. The return of the Shelby wasn't just about recovering a valuable possession. It represented the final resolution of the betrayal that had set everything in motion. Later that evening, as the gala wound down, Dominic found himself in conversation with Meredith Dawson, whose friendship had been one of the unexpected positive developments in the aftermath of his divorce. "Quite a night for you," Meredith observed, her dark eyes warm with genuine pleasure at his success. "The center is extraordinary, Dom. It's going to change how people think about urban sustainability." "That's the goal," Dominic agreed, "though I never expected to be standing here 6 months ago. Back then, I was still focused on making them pay for what they'd done." "And now?" Meredith asked, studying his expression. "Now I'm focused on building what comes next," Dominic replied. "The revenge plan served its purpose. It gave me back control when I felt most powerless. But continuing to define my life by that betrayal would have been its own kind of prison." Meredith nodded thoughtfully. "Speaking of what comes next, would you be interested in dinner sometime? Just the two of us, away from professional events and mutual friends." The invitation was offered casually, but with clear intent, a potential beginning rather than part of an ending. Dominic found himself smiling genuinely, the expression feeling natural in a way it hadn't for longer than he could remember. "I like that," he replied. The next morning, Dominic stood in his warehouse space as the transport truck delivered his restored Shelby GT 500. The car gleamed under the overhead lights, every detail perfect, every component restored to its original glory. He ran his hand along the glossy red finish, feeling the smooth perfection of the surface beneath his fingers. For a moment, he was transported back to that morning before Berlin, before the betrayal, when the car had represented his passion and persistence. Now it symbolized something different, not just what had been taken, but what had been reclaimed and rebuilt. Dominic slid into the driver's seat, inserted the key, and felt the powerful engine rumble to life. The sound was pure mechanical poetry, a symphony of engineering and careful restoration. Without hesitation, he put the car in gear and drove out of the warehouse into the bright morning sunshine. The open road beckoned, a path forward that wasn't defined by the injuries of the past, but by the possibilities of the future. As the powerful machine responded to his touch, Dominic embraced the freedom of movement, of progress, of forward momentum. The architect of his own destiny once more, he accelerated into whatever came next, no longer seeking justice, but living it. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.